Hello, everyone. Welcome to SparrowCast. We have Matt Larson with us today. He's the Senior Director, Client Experiences at Optum. Matt's role entails customer strategy, research, B2B and B2C marketing, and data analytics. With over 15 years of experience in this field, he is here with us today to share his insights on 7 ways one can ensure their CX program is rewarding. Welcome to the show, Matt. We're so happy that you agreed to be a part of this. I'm super excited.
Thanks for having me. Really excited to be here.
All right. Without any further ado, let's begin our session. Over to you, Matt.
Great, thank you. I had a chief growth officer once say that people are coin operated. And what he really meant was that in a sales context, people are going to do what they're incentivized monetarily to do. But we see that same thing in the CX world, that people really act the way that's going to help them get the most benefit based on that. So if we set our speech and our targets around something that encourages bad behavior, they're going to improve that bad behavior, not necessarily improve the customer experience. So as I was looking at this, I really started to try to understand what are ways that we can prevent that from happening as part of that. And the first thing that I came up with was really starting at the very top. When leadership sets the goals and they're talking about customer experience, it needs to be about the customer, not about the metric. If we're constantly saying, oh, we're going to improve NPS, we're going to improve CSAT, that's what's going to be improved, and it may not be improved by actually improving the customer experience. But if leaders are talking about being customer obsessed and talking about the customer being at the center of everything that we do, people are going to act that way and they're going to treat the customer better. The second part about it is really to make sure that you're setting aggressive but achievable goals, and that we're funding those projects that are around those goals so that we can achieve those targets. So if you have the same target for every single business, yet you're funding this business over here, but you're not funding this business over here, it doesn't make sense to have the same target for all of those, because it's meaningless, because this business can never do it if you're not investing in the things that are going to move that customer experience. The third area is really to make sure that you set targets at a business or department level where employees have a shared impact on that number, and a shared vision and a shared goal across those areas. When you take just a single, when you start to get too narrow in setting those targets, each individual is only thinking about their one experience or how they can influence that score to affect just them. But if you're looking across the whole business, then you have a shared goal around the customer for that. That also ensures that you don't end up with sample sizes that are too small that end up not being meaningful to your customer. You know, NPS is a great example of a metric that's terrible when you have really small samples. I've heard examples of call centers incentivizing people on NPS, individual NPS, for 5 responses. A single promoter to detractor in that scenario could move your NPS 40 points. That's not a meaningful measurement, and not something that we should be doing. It's just encouraging that person to find other ways to influence that score, because it's outside of their control. Which brings us to really making sure that we require a minimum number of responses before a score is counted. At our company, we set targets around this department or business has to have this minimum number, or we don't give them an NPS score, because it's not meaningful if it's too small with that. That also ensures that that number is not moving too much or is changed too much around that. Another thing to think about with this is really make sure that you're understanding the transactional metrics versus the relationship metrics. We often try to put an NPS or a customer satisfaction score around a single call or a single interaction. We've got to remember that when we're talking about a relationship, loyalty to a company, it's across all of those interactions. Every single interaction to that company makes up the brand and makes up how they view our company. And so taking a single interaction and trying to apply that interaction to how they feel about the entire company is not an accurate way to do that. So we need to make sure we're clearly separating those individual transaction satisfaction versus that overall loyalty or company satisfaction. Another area in putting the metrics is to make sure that you're putting things in place in your program, in your customer loyalty program, that help to make sure that people are not gaming the system. So you want to make sure you're keeping your samples separate as much as you can so that people can't influence those. Make sure you're training people on how to talk to the customer about that. Many of us have had experiences like things like at dealerships where it's like, oh, your customer feedback's really important to me, but if you don't give me a 10, then don't fill it out. Or, my kids aren't going to be fed if I don't get a 10 for this. Well, what are you encouraging with that? You're not encouraging people to give you honest feedback. You're not encouraging people to get a better customer experience. Your employees are gaming the system to get the score that they need for their metric, and all they care about is that metric, not about how can I make your experience better or what's the customer experience. So making sure that you're training those your customer facing people and the people that are asking for that feedback properly, and then making sure that the metrics behind that are also there and you've got systems in place to check that people aren't gaming those systems. I've seen everything from people, choosing the sample, manipulating the sample that's there, who gets the survey. I've even seen things as blatant as people filling out the survey for customers. You need to have things in place to make sure that people aren't doing that, and make sure that people know that it's not okay to do those things, that this is about improving the customer's experience. Lastly, and I think the most important tip of all is really obsess over your customers and highlight those great experiences for the customers. Then you can take those, you can start to prove to leadership and different things, here's the economic value of that, here's what it really means to improve those customers. And for you're really going to be a customer-centric company, it's really about the customer and not about some metrics with that. The metric will follow, the metric will come with that, but it's really about the customer. So those are really the 7 tips to make sure that your metrics are, and your measurement is really improving the customer experience and measuring that improvement, not just improving a metric.
Right. Great. So indeed, I guess, nowadays people are just concerned about creating these numbers on the metrics side rather than giving actual satisfaction or actual customer experience to their customers, right? So they just, getting
There's definitely a risk of that.
Okay. So that was a truly amazing session, Matt. So I'm sure that our audience too appreciates the insights and thoughts you just shared with us today. So let me summarize the key takeaways from our session. So first one would be ensuring that your metrics are encouraging your employees to create great customer experiences. Second one would be setting targets at a business or a department level to get a meaningful number of results. Third one would be all employees should be obsessed about the customers and the metrics who will just follow them. Once again, thanks for your time and for sharing your thoughts, Matt. And we shall see you again in the next SparrowCast.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.